Welcome to the Narrative Mindset Podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, feel free to go back and view previous episodes when you get time. Today, I kind of want to discuss some things. I'm kind of riff, no script, no nothing like that. Just some things I think about sometimes that I wanted to share with viewers. One thing that I continue to mention is I always like to, I don't know, I always like to tell viewers about what's going on with my podcast. Um, right now, I don't know, I'm struggling to find my voice somewhat. And I've been doing a lot of things, getting microphones. I think I talked about in an earlier episode dealing with my voice condition, and I have my somewhat studio. It's a portable sound studio. I bought it off of Amazon, and it works pretty good. It's not soundproof, but it creates a natural environment for sound to exist in, a dry environment. So that's working pretty good. And a few other things I did. But I don't know, I've been trying to struggle with my voice as far as my podcast is concerned. Because I'm doing episodes every day, which is a little bit, some people may say that's a little bit too much. I'm biting off more than I can chew. Probably am. But I'm trying to be consistent. And, when you do a podcast, you really worry about what people, you kind of do it backwards because you worry about what people are going to want to hear instead of putting out whatever you have and then naturally attracting listeners who are attracted to your voice or your content or your consistency, because that's what we're so used to. We're so used to everybody doing something online. Everybody, being able to, at a snap of a finger, come up with something, and all of a sudden they're getting millions of views each time they upload something. And, we all want that. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants to be, well, let me take that back. Everybody doesn't want to be famous. I almost said famous. But what I meant to say is everybody wants that extra, just a little extra little bit of income. A lot of people hate their jobs. I don't know too many people that like going to work. Or at least I don't. But I have been able to transition from the job, which was highest paid job that I've had in my entire life, which was a railroad. And I was able to leave that job and go to rideshare. And with the railroad, it's the thing about the railroad, the thing about the railroad is, you have this dream of working for the railroad, and I'm curious. So it really sparks your curiosity because you're thinking, oh man, when I get here to the railroad, I'm going to find out what they do, find out how they can operate a train with a remote control and all this other stuff. So, you get the call first. and you're like super excited because you got the call. So once you get the call, you're like really nervous, and they take you through the steps of your physical and everything like that, and you're like really excited, and you pass that, and you give yourself a pat on the back. At least I did. I was excited because I'm like, the thought was I finally made it. Like the Jeffersons, moving on up. So I got past that, and then I got the call, said, "Hey, you're going to uh, their training centers," which most of them have training centers in, I think, Georgia. I think CN has a training center in uh, that's over in Canada. So, but all of them have training centers that you have to go to, and basically, the training center is basically a shutdown railroad terminal that they're using to train people on instead of just walking away from it. Which was a good, I'd give it to railroads. That was definitely a good idea because you can't just lay tracks and put rail cars all over the place anywhere. It's just not going to happen. But so you get down to the railroad center and you're excited, and they constantly emphasize, "Oh, you're gonna make all this money, and you know, you know, testing, and be careful, and all this. You're gonna make all this money. I got a boat, I got a house, yada yada yada." So you get down there and you do their testing, and at least for me, I was nervous. I was like, man, I can't fail. That was the main thing I told myself. I can't fail. So I kept, taking it step by step by step. Okay, I passed this. Now I'm going here. I passed this. Now I'm going here. I passed this. Now I'm going here. So, needless to say, I did pass everything down at the center. And so you come back, you get done with that, and you come back and you go to your terminal. And the key thing about that I noticed about the railroad is they're like super nice when you're a new guy. When you come in, "Hey Joe, how's it going? I'm Bob," and yada yada yada. They're cheesing and smiling and laughing, all this kind of stuff. But once you get done with your training, because they call it marked up, because you have to follow a guy around for, I think it's like 4 months, and it doesn't make sense, because what they'll do is they'll say, "This guy got marked up literally yesterday, and today, new guy walks in, MTO says you'll be working with him, and the guy gets $8. It's like, hang on for a minute. I just started. I barely know my job. I'm getting $8 to be responsible for this guy's life while I barely know my job. And now that I'm marked up, I got to worry about you hiding in bushes and flying drones and all kinds of other stuff, trying to fire me, because that's what the railroad does. They have a rule book, and the MTO's job, believe it or not, is to write up as many employees as many times as he can, and I honestly think he gets a bonus when they get fired. And that's just a wild system, because, and they also have a buddy system too that really got on my nerves. It was like I worked with this guy, and he had been there for a little while, and we went down to this siding, and he asked me. He said, "Hey, can you tell me about the red light?" Because he had never been done a red light paperwork and talked to the dispatcher and all that type of stuff. So I explained it to him. But the only thing I forgot to tell him, because I didn't think I needed to, nobody had to tell me, is that you can only use it once, because we went in and did the siding, whatever, the local business or whatever you want to call it. So we come back out, and he runs right through the red light, but from the opposite direction. And then we get, taken off the train. Somebody recruited us, embarrassed, and we go in the office, and I have to write a report, and I'm trying to make up something, because now I got to be responsible for anything the guy I was working with did. Even after he told me, "Hey, man, I got this." I said, "Okay." But what I was going to say is nobody had to tell me about a red light, because the way I looked at the railroad was I look at a red light on the railroad the same way I would a red light in the street. Am I going to go through a red light when an officer or somebody who's qualified to do so tells me to? Yes. When I come back the other way, if there's a red light, am I going to just go through it because I went through it the other direction? No. Common sense. I'm going to stop regardless until somebody again tells me I have permission to go through a red light. Same thing with railroad tracks. I treat railroad tracks like city streets. Would I be walking in the street? No. Would I stick my foot out in the street where the cars can pass by? Some people would, I know, but not me. Would I walk in between two cars that aren't secure? No. So it's the same rules with the railroad tracks. And so fast forward, they wrote us up. I got 30 days off. But my final breaking point was when I was doing another industry. And of course, the MTOs were watching me, and they saw me put a car into emergency. And when you put a car in emergency, you uncouple it and you let the air hoses separate. And there's a safety feature when you put air to a car. It draws the brakes away from the rotor or whatever. So as long as there's air being put to it, the brakes are held away. But once that air exhausts, those brakes clamp on there harder than any human could put a brake on the car. So it's a safety feature. You're not supposed to do it. But my point to them was, it's not like I let a car with no air on it go into emergency. It's not like we didn't test our cars before we left the yard. That's what you do in the railroad. You test your cars before you leave the railroad for the simple purpose of, just in case a car cuts loose, you make sure that you have air down to the bottom of your train for that purpose. So if a car cuts loose, then that car will immediately go into emergency because you've already did a brake test before you left the yard. You have air, so you're safe. So at that point, the MTLs are watching me, and we got into an argument, and I had some choice words because I was just kind of at that point, I was just kind of like sick of it, you know, because there was another incident where I was over at a yard and I called the manager, and let's say the manager's name is Brian, and say there's another manager there that kind of sounds like him. The manager's name is Kevin. So I called him and say, hey, I said, who's this, Kevin? And the manager says, no, motherfucker, this is not Kevin. I said, oh, hey, man, I'm sorry. My bad. No, fuck you. And I was like, at that point, I said, you know what? I'm 52 years old. I'm not doing this. You don't pay me enough to let, some manager degrade me. You just don't pay enough. And I think the railroad, even now, is like $1,500 every 2 weeks. Maybe if you're on a job, you may see 23, maybe 25 if you're lucky. Or if you work all week, no days off, work and sleep, you may make $3,000 every 2 weeks. It's $1,500 a week. But I got a news flash for you. I do rideshare, and I make 13 to 15 a week, and that's only because of me, not because the money isn't available. So when they finally broke me up the last time for putting the train into emergency, I finally said, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm really sick of it. I just said I can't do this anymore because as far as my moral compass is concerned, I just said, you're not paying me enough money. I can understand maybe if it was $2,000 a week, maybe I would think about it. But for $700 a week, absolutely not. It's just not going to happen. It's just not the way my mind works. So I ended up leaving and doing this when I started doing rideshare. Because I spent my life working my way up to that point, and I was so proud of myself because I was able to say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I love the fact that I'm always in just in case mode. I'm always saving for just in case. I'm always looking at, what if something happens? What if what if this? What if that? So I'm always preparing myself because I spent so much of my life, you know, I guess the way I say it is my ambition was bottled up. So it was like to a point to where, once I left Kalamazoo, Michigan and moved to Detroit, it was like my ambition, like it opened up a geyser, of opportunities and things that I could do to make money that I had been trying to do for so long and not being able to really make, what I wanted to make, because I think I delivered prescriptions, and at one point in time I was working 7 to 2 or 7 to 3, and I would go pick up my daughter, go get some prescriptions. While I was doing prescriptions, drop her off at her mom's house so she could babysit, finish up the prescriptions, go to class. When I was done with class, go pick her back up, go home, try to finish up a little bit of homework, help her with her homework, cook dinner, watch a couple seconds of TV, because that's all I had. And after that, um, go to bed, get up the next day and do it all over again. And that was when I was paying. That's when I was paying child support and the health care and going through that phase of my life. But I don't know. It's sometimes I think you spend your life you're chasing growth, I think. Because at one point in time, you're really not making that much money. And you feel like, you're paying taxes. It seems like a lot, but it's not. And you pretty much dream of making big bucks. When I was making, I think, $15 an hour, I think I was bringing home maybe maybe $1,200 a month, maybe. I dreamed I would have done anything to make the kind of money I made when I went to work for the railroad. But as I was saying, when you're not making that much money, you dream of these big numbers. And, I can remember I used to daydream about what I was going to do with it, what I was going to buy, what I was going to, have, this, that, and the other. And I did that for so long. And I think that's the reason why when I finally got to that point, I think that's the reason why everything worked out so good. Because I practiced this plan for 10, 15 years. And that's the thing. It's when I finally got to the point of making pretty decent money, the railroad, they pay 30, $40 an hour. But the problem was, and what was my turning point in the whole pay scale thing, why I got off of that, is because my very last check when I left, my very last check was $8,000. I only brought home $4,000. They took $4,000 out of my check. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. $4,000. Like I said, I used to make $1,200 a month. So they took more than I made in almost 4 months earlier in my career. And at that point, I said, I'm through with overtime. I'm done with it because, if you're going to take that much money from me, then it really starts to make me think, okay, let me even this out and see at what point is this whole not making a lot of money, paying no taxes, to making a lot of money, paying a lot of taxes. Where's the even point in that? Because it's just, is it worth it? Is it worth, working that hard and trying to make a bunch of money and all of that kind of stuff? Because it's, you're working just for the government to take your money you never get back. And then it's like, if you, when you make enough money, if you don't have expenses at the end of the year, then you even they have nerve to tell you owe more taxes at the end of the year. It's like, dude, what is going on here? What's going on there? Take me back to when I was making, $8 an hour. not making that much money, but, I ain't got to pay no taxes either. I ain't got to pay a whole lot of taxes, so it's different, and my daughters, they're, 24 and 26, they're experiencing life also. I had my one daughter called me the other day, and she was telling me that she wanted to come live with me, and she was need to get her life together and stuff like that. And I remember what it was like being her age. I remember, and I remember feeling like like I had to figure it out, you know, and going through that struggle, and it's tough because mine it didn't work out for me until it was big until what 96. That's when my life took a little bit of a turn in a good direction, and I finally kind of found my what I needed to be doing, what I wanted to do anyways. I wanted to be a welder, you know, and that was when I ended up going to school and got that opportunity, and started getting jobs and got my journeyman's card and yada yada yada, things of that nature. Oh, also, I'm glad I thought about that. Also, um, the thing I don't like about regular working jobs is because it's like everybody wants to have a fucking dick measuring contest. Who's the best? I'm a better welder than you are. I'm a better this than you are. I'm a better, you know. It's like, dude, we all work for somebody else. So I'm not going to get into a argument with somebody about which one of us can be a better employee for somebody else. And it doesn't make sense. Let's get into it about, who can start their own business, who can do this, who can do that. Let's get into creative ideas. But having an argument about who can be a better employee is just asinine, I think. That just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I wanted to talk about, I can remember back when I was 12 years old. This was back in like the 80s, 85, I think it was. And that was back in the day when, we had I call them home rules. When your parents had the rules of, I'm leaving, don't go out that door, don't let nobody in my house, yada, yada, yada. If they had have just went around the block, every kid on the block was outside. We all got told the same thing. But the reason I mention that is because one day, as my mom left, I went out with a friend of mine, went over to the store, whatever, ended up getting a car accident that changed my entire life. I had a head injury, I had, drastic surgery, all kinds of stuff. And, I want to say, first of all, that my mother spared no expense to get me into programs and help me to get back to the way I was, which was strange. But one thing that it helped me understand is I know what people are going through. Some people who are mentally ill, and I can understand what they're going through because I knew what it was like to be crazy. I can remember getting out and going back to school. And I remember this guy, I knew a friend of mine named Daniel. I used to whisper in his ear every day, I'm going to kill you. Every single day. And he'd just tell the teacher would say, stop. Miss Wilson would say, stop. I would do it every single day. I mean, just imagine that. You got some kid, a friend of yours, just got in an accident. He came back to school, and all of a sudden you hear him whisper in your ear, I'm going to kill you. Every single day. I mean, that almost sends chills up his spine, and he used to laugh about it, whatever, and it was like I had moments of just being nuts, and then I would just snap out of it. And it seemed like it happened only when I was idle, when I just, with my mind, I wasn't doing anything with my mind. That's when it happened, you know. And the thing that I understand about some mentally ill people is when you're talking to them, you're not talking to them because they have no control over their body. It's like they're sitting in this room in their head with a glass window. They can see everything their body is doing, but they have no control of it. So you have to talk to them, not the body, because the body is being operated by a damaged brain. They're in there, but they sometimes have no control over their functions. And that's why sometimes a lot of them end up, doing things that end up getting them in trouble. But the point is, it's not them. It's not them doing it. It's their body is being operated by a damaged brain that the real person who is them, can see, but there's nothing they can do about it. So it's different, because I remember going through that, because I can remember when I first got out the hospital, it was like almost like a dream, almost, and I still almost till this day, I still pinch myself sometimes because I want to make sure that all of this life that I've lived after that accident is real and not a dream. That would kind of suck if I kind of find out this whole life was a dream and I ain't write down no lottery numbers or nothing, dates and stuff like that. So I knew when I would be rich, but I can just remember, sometimes me personally sitting in my own head and watching myself like, it's almost like a dream. You're just sitting there watching you do stuff and you're trying to do something, but there's nothing you can do because you have no control over your body. Your body is being controlled by a damaged brain. So you just have to let it happen and let whatever, do whatever. And that's just the way that goes. But it gives me a better understanding of individuals who are mentally ill, because it just, I don't know, it puts a different twist to that type of thing. I did some work on myself. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode. I'm not an expert at anything, but I did some work on myself recently. It was after my divorce. And when I got divorced, like most people, they want to blame the other person. Oh, it was her fault, and she did this, and she did that, and she was this kind of person or whatever. I did that for a minute, but then one day, I don't know, I kind of thought about it and just said, you know what? I I can't really do anything about what she did. She has to handle those things. But I can do something about the person I was. So I did an analogy on myself and kind of figured out who I was and where I was. And I, kind of dissected my entire life because, real quick, I like to figure things out. And it's a little bit deeper than that. I like to figure things out to a point to where I have the last piece of the puzzle and I can put it all together because I can't let it go until I do. Some things I think about for, 20, 30 years until I finally find that last piece of that puzzle and then put everything together. So with that, what I did was I just asked myself, was I happy? Was I content? Was I peaceful? Happy, content, peaceful, and, you know, did I mind my own business? A lot of that stuff was I wasn't, but I fixed it and I did what they call the work on yourself. And years later, it was kind of just recently actually. I did a little bit more work. Kind of the I guess you'd call it the last step in that process is where you get people out of your life that aren't happy for you. They don't want to see you do good, or they're playing in your face, or they're, just not, happy for you, talking about business and that type of thing. There was a family member that I knew, one of my favorite cousins. But the problem was I started to notice that once she's doing pretty good, and she's kind of got this thing, right, where she'll go around people who have less than her, and you may have somebody who maybe we're talking about, I'm trying to make more money, Christmas is coming up, whatever. And she'll just blurt out, well, I make $220,000 a year. It's like, I want to tell her sometime, I mean, you sound like an asshole, and that's not any form of hate or anything because, people are really quick to say, oh, well, he's just hating on her because, she's doing good and what. No, I'm not. I'm not a hater. I used to be a hater. I'll admit that. But I got out of my own way, started using people's success as motivation for me to do what I could do in my life. So I'm not a hater. But it's just, it's annoying, And, I started noticing that she was doing it all the time. And that's the strange part about people is it's like your life is that good that you have the nerve to call somebody else and, I'm not struggling, don't get me wrong, but I'm also not perfect, but you have the nerve to call somebody else and kind of, the slang term is, playing in your face, and it's like I started noticing it more and more and more, and her getting attitudes and all this other stuff because sometimes I would just tell her, I don't want to hear it. I got better things to do. I'm 100% focused on myself, and I just don't want to hear it. And sometimes, she would get upset, and catch attitudes, and I was like, you know what? The best way to handle this is cut you off. Because at this point in time, I just turned 53 yesterday. Thank you. Thank you. Any gifts can be sent to www.thenarrativemindsetpodcast.com. But just turned 53 yesterday. But like I said, the end process to doing the work on myself was like, yeah, it's time to, cut people out of my life that aren't happy for me and don't want to see me doing good. And I'm not saying that my cousin doesn't want to see me doing good. It's just like she's kind of, I guess the best way I can describe it is like a broke Diana Ross, a wannabe Diana Ross, making a little bit of money, thinks she's kind of above everybody else. So she's constantly, telling everybody where she lives, how much money she makes, and all this kind of stuff. And also want to mention something else. When you run up on a person like that, it also makes you think, and this is something I figured out, it also makes you think, okay, hang on. Does all of this stuff define you? What are you without all of this stuff? Me, I got my car, I got a bunch of other stuff. None of that stuff defines me. It's good to have, but none of that stuff defines me. So that was another thing that I thought about. But it was like that was the far end of me doing the work on myself, because I said that I refuse to go around people, that anybody who's older than 21 and doesn't act like it, I don't want to be around you. Whether it's somebody who's older than 21 and got some bad kids, grown adults who have said something smart, acted funny, said something about somebody else, something negative, said something about the way that person spends their money, said something about what that person has on, I don't want to be around you. Because I do not do negativity. I think I was reading an article the other day about J. Cole. He walked out of Money Long's studio, I think. So he walked out after 2 minutes because she said something bad about somebody else, and he just didn't want to be a part of that particular energy. And I definitely understand where that was coming from, because, that's, you want to be around people that are happy for you. You want to be around people that want to see you do good. And the bad part about it, the bad part about it is it takes us so long to figure that out. Because I can remember back in the Tupac days, and I'm not blaming Tupac, don't get me wrong, but I think that particular era it was back when we were in the clique era, where everybody got, was with their homeboys, bunch of guys hanging out together. But the bad part about it is America, and I'll just say America, younger men, including myself, the only thing that we got from that is a bunch of guys hanging out together. We didn't get that, okay, these guys are hanging out together because that was the point they were at in their lives. But I give credit to all people who are in the industry, all people who are doing something, because the funny part about that is you take most of these people, you have guys that get together, and do something, and then they're off doing their own businesses. I love that. I love a person that doesn't have time. A person that I call, hey, y'all want to get out, have a beer, have a drink, whatever. Let me check my schedule. I love that. I don't like a person that I call, hey, you want to go hang or whatever? Oh, well, okay, cool. Just let me know when. I'm available anytime. Because that's telling me that they don't have much going on for themselves other than the only people who are excluded out of that is people who, maybe be handicapped, or if it's somebody that's a family man, he at home with his family, taking care of his family, yada, yada, yada. Those are the people who are excluded from that. But if you have two legs and two arms just like me, you can get out and do something, and you're not taking full advantage of your time, I don't want to be bothered with you because you're not a motivation for me. I want to be bothered with somebody who's busier than me because that motivates me to get out and do other things. And you know, that's the part that usually, I don't know how to say it, lower income, just regular people, I'll say it that way. That's the part they didn't get out of it. They only got the hang out part. They didn't get, everybody, you know, get their own businesses and stuff like that. Let's get together, you know, to do music video. Let's get together for a meeting. Let's get together for this. Say our what's up, say what's good, man, have a beer, whatever, drink, whatever, talk about the business, and then we gone, because we gone taking care of our own businesses. So that's the part that people didn't get from that. And that was a sad part, but that's something that I love about uh famous people or anybody who's got a business and doing their own thing, yada yada yada. I love that about them because they're just incredibly busy. One of my goals is to be like I'd love to be like Smartless. That's my goal as far as my podcast is concerned, or any business that I do. It's just amazing that they can, get their podcast, and all of a sudden they got Amazon chasing after them. After that, they got this person offering them a deal, and there's all kind of stuff. I mean, it kind of makes you wonder, like, dude, when do you have time for your family? You're doing movies, you're doing the podcast, you're doing flying over here, family vacations, and it's like, when do you have time to do your podcast? It's like crazy. But that's my goal with my podcast, is to be Smartless, or I don't know, be bigger than Smartless. Be somewhere in that realm. Also want to say that my one of my what do you call it? One of the people I kind of pattern myself after is Blind Boy. Great podcast, interesting podcast. I've been reading a lot about him, and it's like I understand where he's coming from. I do, but one thing about it is I can't. There's no way in the world I can afford to turn down any kind of uh any kind of funding, branding or whatever. I mean, I wouldn't care if it was Trump that said, "Hey, I want to give you, whatever." I'd take it because, the truth of the matter is, here's the truth, and I'm a black guy. Here is the truth: Trump's money spends better than my money will. Trump's money will. I can do more with Trump's money than I can with mine. And if I have to stand next to Trump and, and, you know, whatever, because Trump is not a bad guy, and that gets me get steam rolling and income rolling in so I can, you know, uh, provide for my daughters and give them what they want and give them some information and, inspiration and, you know, trust funds or whatever and expose them to people who they would never meet. If I didn't know Trump, if that's what you know being with Trump can expose me to, then I'm fine with it. Because you got to admit the guy is rolling. He's doing a lot of stuff, but he's like it's banking. One thing that ain't lacking is his bank account. He is winning. It's like, bruh, you know, Trump, I am, you're a good guy. Uh, you know, I don't, I don't see you as being a racist. I see you as kind of, I don't know, being kind of, what do you call it? A little stubborn, but not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. Definitely, I would support you in a way for the reason of, like I said, supporting you would allow me to do more for the small group of people that I'm around. Supporting Trump would allow me to gain more revenue. And you never know. It's you never know what kind of places you can go when you think outside the box. And Trump has done some good things. He's pardoned a couple of people, who nobody else would have thought twice about pardon, about not about their pardon. They still be in jail or prison. So hey, it's a good dude. Some of the stuff, a little bit questionable, but like I said, if supporting him, you know, if he would, if he wanted to put his face on the Narrative Mindset podcast, and all of a sudden I was making more money than Smartless, then hey, send me your picture. I do not discriminate. Because it's all green. When it stops being green, then maybe I'll think about discriminating. But at this point, it's still green. So it's kind of different. I heard that he did something where he was trying to set it up to where he could run a third term or whatever. I mean, Trump, you'll be like 95, and that's, it's not good. Although, we'll say, let me back up a little bit. Trump he looks good for his age. He's not like your normal, 80-something-year-old who's, running around here and can barely, need a walker and all this other stuff. He's getting around good. So, I got to give him credit for that, But to run a third term, I'm not sure if he's planning on trying to run until, they carry him out the White House in a casket or what. But I don't know. I don't know. He's setting it up so that in the event he wants to run, he can. So I don't know. It's what we voted for. So, who can you really blame? Because we voted for it. That's what it was, a vote. It's just the people who voted, I think they were not expecting this. I think they were expecting something a little bit more, a little bit less, little bit less, a little bit less extra. I think that's what they were hoping for, or what they voted for. But I mean, you can't really. I don't know. You can't really. You're gonna vote for a president, but he has certain agendas that he's gonna do. But number one, he's not gonna tell you everything. That's number one. Number two, I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but you can't dictate everything that their president is going to do, good or bad. You just can't. You vote, and it's like a crapshoot. He'll tell you some of his objectives, but he's not going to tell you everything that he's going to do, and that's why you you find out as much information as you can, and that you just roll with it, and that's really all you can do. But in Trump's case, the dice might have been fixed, that somewhat. But again, not saying Trump is a bad person. Mr. Trump, this is the Narrative Mindset Podcast. If you would like to be a guest on the show, feel free to reach out. I would love to for you to promote the Narrative Mindset Podcast. Love to be a part of your team, because your money spends better than mine. And we could call it the Narrative Trump Podcast. For a fee. But he got on Charlemagne, guy over on the Breakfast Club podcast, which is a smart dude. He kind of he has a lot of different views on things that actually are pretty educated. So, good guy, very very business minded. I like that about him. I like that he's doing things. And he said one time, and this is real important. He said one time, hey, I've gotten to a point where I don't need to put my name on everything. But that was that kind of hit hard. I've gotten to a point where I don't need to put my name on everything. I mean, that's, imagine the level of, I guess you would call it, career maturity that you've arrived at when you got into a point where I don't need everybody to know that this is mine. Because I'm assuming that's not the reason I did it. It's like, it's almost unfathomable coming from, people who are going to work every day. We're all struggling. We're all, doing this, doing that, trying to, scratching and crawling for any extra that we can get a hold of. And then this guy, he's to a point to where he says, I've reached a point where I don't need to put my name on everything. I mean, that's amazing. It's really amazing, because it just shows the mental maturity that person has got to, and as well as he deserves it. It just shows that mental maturity that he's arrived at, and it's definitely a wonderful thing. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Narrative Mindset Podcast.